Witchy and Weird podcast.
Hi, Witchy and Weird. I feel like I haven't spoken to y'all in this format for a while because I took one of the solo episode weeks off, and then I posted a previously recorded Patreon episode in between the guest episodes. So I am excited to be back to have you all to myself. Not that I don't show up in the guest interviews, but I feel like I'm more just asking questions to let the other people have their space in the spotlight. And boy, this week was pretty intense for me. I don't know how it was for you. Lots of good things going on in my business, having meetings coming up even tomorrow with new people to sell my products at. A lot of other stuff going on. So I just wanted to have kind of a fun episode where you all can just enjoy and listen. Not really something that's super heavy in terms of healing related or in terms of education where you're going to maybe be taking notes or something. I know some of you, I would be taking notes with my freaking Mars in Virgo. So today's episode is what I'm titling Amanda's favorite psychic stories. So I'm just basically going to be sharing with y'all the crazy, energetic, psychic things that have happened to me that I think are noteworthy. I've been wanting to do this type of episode for a while to just like share stuff from my life and to share. I find it's really intriguing and fascinating to listen to people's different psychic and energetic stories because everybody's intuition works differently. Your intuition is your own language. So I always want to know, how do other people's intuition work, right? What does it look like for them? How are they experiencing things? So I've kind of written down sort of chronologically, so you'll see that as my life progresses in these stories, the different experiences I had. And if you've had similar ones, I'm really excited to hear from them, hear from you about them, either on social media, or you can, if you listen on Anchor, you can actually reply to the episode. So let's get into it. And as a disclaimer, I may have covered some of these stories in previous episodes, maybe not as much in detail, but I still feel like they're relevant to share. There's new people on here. Not everybody listens to every episode. So if you feel like, wait a minute, I've heard this before, maybe you're just having psychic deja vu, or maybe it's actually you've heard it before on the podcast. So you're not going crazy. That'd be cool if it was like, oh, psychic deja vu. I've really dreamt about this entire podcast episode. Wow, amazing. Okay, so I have four actually big stories from my childhood that I'm going to share. Big meaning they have stood out in my mind. I'll start with the one that's like not as crazy or not as much in depth, but probably a lot of other people will have similarity to. So as a kid, I had extremely vivid dreams. I would sometimes have like the nightmare dreams are like falling and then you wake up because you feel the sensation. But I would also, if you've ever seen the show, it's called Super Jail on Adult Swim. I had dreams that were very just random things popping out and stuff that didn't make sense. Like I was literally traveling in a different dimension. But a big part of my dreams in my childhood was premonitions. So, and I've talked to people about this throughout my life, and a lot of people have had similar stuff to this, especially psychic people or people who have become like figured out that they're psychic later in life. I had tons of dreams as a kid that weren't necessarily life altering premonitions, but were more so I would, in vivid detail, see where I'm sitting, where other people are sitting, what we're saying, exactly where we were, exactly what was like. It would be people sitting around a table, exactly what was being eaten, where they were sitting, what they were going to say. And it was very hyper zoomed in. It wasn't like, oh, we were at this restaurant. It was like, we're eating somewhere, we're eating this food, and we're saying this one sentence, and then that's it. That's all I remembered from the dream. And for the most part, I wouldn't see people's faces because I hadn't met them yet. um and I know there's this theory about dreams that all the people and things that we see is stuff we've already experienced in one way or another. So that's how we have access to that. So I thought that was very interesting that a lot of the stuff that I dreamt about, I couldn't see people's faces because I didn't have access to them yet. But I had a bunch of those as a kid and I had no idea what they were. I always thought that they were weird, but I remembered them. And even up until I would say this year, I have gone through life and just been experiencing whatever and then being like, wait a minute, something's going to happen right now. I'm having deja vu. And it, for me and for the people I've talked to about this, and I'd love to hear your opinion, we just kind of came to this consensus separately. And then when we connected different people, um, we felt like it was just because there was no specific thing that happened that was being predicted. It was just a very commonplace, like, minute or two that we were experiencing ahead of time. We felt that it was just a feedback for us to let us know that we're on the right path, that we're where we are meant to be. Wow, that was a mouthful. Because we've already known that or experienced that. And a lot of my stuff happened when I was a kid, and now I don't have as many as an adult of the deja vu moments meeting up with my dreams. So it was I hadn't had one for a while, and I think I had one this year, which was pretty cool. Um, but yeah, that happened to me a lot when I was a kid. I did, however, have one actual like premonition dream that, I guess, not that the other ones weren't important, but that was like, oh, you predicted something cool. And I think I talked about this before, but um, I predicted, or rather, I don't know if I predicted it, but I feel like I tapped into the same as something was happening. Like this happens a lot for people, like when a family member dies and they're sleeping and they don't know about it. They dream about that family member coming to visit them, and then they wake up and they find out the family member passed away. So it's like at the same time that it's happening. So I had that in a very like metaphorical dream. I was probably in elementary school, middle school, probably elementary school, I feel like. Maybe beginning of middle school. I was visiting my dad for the summer, and he lived in Las Vegas, and I grew up in California. So I was in a different state, and I had a extremely crazy dream about it was dreams don't they're not based in reality. And I have theories about this place where we were, but it was the backyard to my house where I grew up, but the backyard was open up to this whole like cul-de-sac where all the kids in the neighborhood were playing. And all of a sudden there was this giant like earth-shattering earthquake that split the floor in two, and all the kids and everybody started running around and out of fear. And my mom opened up the back door to our house and told me to go get my brother and my other sibling. And my little brother was born at that time, but I did not have another sibling in real life that was a child. And I found my brother and I brought him back. And then I was frantically searching around for this other child that was my sibling, and I couldn't find them. And I felt really bad. And I went back and I told my mom I couldn't find the other sibling. And it was crazy because in the dream, I didn't even know what they looked like. I was like, who's this other sibling? Because I knew who my brother was, but I didn't know who this other sibling was. And um, when I woke up, I felt very, very compelled to tell my mom about it because I didn't really regularly share these types of things with her. And so when I told her, was very silent for a couple of seconds. And then she was like, when did this happen? Explicitly when? Like, was it last night? Was it the night before? And I was like, I think it was last night or something. And she told me that she was pregnant again and she miscarried. Um, and I think it's interesting. I've since then have thought that that place with all these children, like maybe that is a place where children who aren't on this plane exist. What that it was just full of all these children playing. So I thought that was very interesting. Or maybe it represents that in some type of way. Since not as a kid I thought about that, but since then I've thought about what is the significance of that space and the separation in the earth. Like those people cannot come to earth, right? So I thought that was very interesting. And yeah, it was pretty wild. Like I feel like there's something to be spoken for when you have such a deep connection with certain people, which is why it usually happens for people who dream about that with their family members, or like their best friends. Um, Another thing that happened to me, which I am still sort of baffled by, which but I think is really freaking cool. When I was a kid, was my mom and I were walking on the street, and I just kind of had. I hope you can relate to this, but I've never really experienced anything since then. What I describe it as is a recognizing of a soul connection to complete stranger. There was an adult. I was a child. My mom had to hold my hand when I was walking on the sidewalk. And I just saw this person, and there was this deep, like, it was just us existing in the world. And I looked at them and they looked at me directly in the eyes at the same time, which isn't very common for adults to just look at a child directly in the eyes, like get their attention caught by a small child when they're walking the street. And we just stopped right in front of each other, and I felt like I knew this person. And a person stopped and was looking at me, and it was like very awkward because my mom was like, what's going on? None of us were talking. And my mom was like, do you know this person? And I was like, no, do you know this person? But I knew this person. It felt like we were speaking, having unspoken conversation with our energy or our souls, or something that we recognize maybe from a past life or something. We were meant to cross paths or something. And even now, as I'm saying this, I'm receiving intuitive information that maybe it was like the ending of a cycle with somebody. And that feels really like resonant for me right now, that maybe we did have a lot of stuff and that was the last time that we needed to meet because we ended some cycle or something together. But yeah, I've never had an experience. Like, I met tons of people who are my friends, and I've never had that experience of, oh, I just know, I know some people have that, right? They meet someone, they're like, oh, I know you were in my past life as somebody else. Um, but yeah, I mean, to be fair, I was way more open as a kid. And I'm trying to be more open, but I do have really strong boundaries around that. So I feel like I don't have that many experiences happening now, because of that. And then the last story from my childhood is about a time I met like a guardian angel in real life, which was really cool. Um, I was one of those kids that like to hide under the clothing racks in the department stores and the inside of them. It's very comforting. It feels very safe on the inside of those. I know tons of kids who love that, and or tons of adults who as kids loved that. And my mom would always be like, stop hiding in between those. You're going to get lost. Cause I'm just there. Cause my mom was like a single parent or whatever. And, for some time, and, she's shopping for clothes, and I'm bored as fuck. Like, I'm a child. So I'm making a game out of it. I'm making it fun. And she would, she'd be moving on, and she wouldn't tell me, okay, let's go, we're moving on. She'd just be like, you need to pay attention because I'm going to leave and you're going to get lost. And, I was like, okay, yeah, because I would always catch it at the right time and be like, well, and then go find her. But I was messing around, and when I looked up, she wasn't there, and I freaked out because I was like pretty good at catching that. And it was funny that one time when my mom told me it was gonna happen, it happened. That whole like, you should listen to your mother. Um, and so I was freaking out, and I started walking around trying to look for her, and I couldn't find her. So I thought maybe she left the department store. So I started walking in the mall. Um, and I've also never had, the way I remember it, I've never had experiences like this where I feel like I was tapping into my intuition in an intentional way, but an unconscious way during this time where I literally told myself, you need to look for somebody that you can trust so that you can ask them to help you find your mom. That's kind of what I was doing, was like, clearly my mom isn't here, so I need to find help to find my mom. Because, I watched enough TV where I knew, like, if you go to the security, they can page your mom over the thing. So, and I don't even know how I knew that because I was very young, probably like 4. Um, but I just was looking at everybody and I kind of saw their like auras, or it wasn't fully in reality. It was like I could see some energies, and I was looking at people, and a lot of people were just passing me by and they weren't even noticing me. And I would kind of give them like a scan, and can I trust this person? No, I can't trust that person. Can I trust this person? No, I can't trust this person. And then this lady who, she had like brown hair and she was wearing white, I think. She saw me and was like, "Are you lost?" Which, if you see a kid wandering around, you're probably like, "Are you lost?" Right? And I was like, "Yes," but it just felt like she already knew all the answers to all the questions that she was asking and was gonna ask about me. And she, like, her energy was very like white, angelic energy. Like, I knew I could trust this lady, type of thing. Like, that's what the auric energy kind of looked like to me. And she said, she like picked me up too, I think, and she was holding me and she was like, "Okay, what does your mom look like?" And I'm like a child trying to describe what an adult looks like. It's like, I think she wears glasses, like stuff like that. And I think she said her name was like Angie or something like that. And we were walking, and then my mom, she just pointed, because I was looking at her trying to tell her the things about my mom, and she pointed and she's like, "Is that your mom?" It's like, "Yes, how did you know? That's my mom." Probably, like my mom's the one walking around frantic, so it's a little bit obvious. But yeah, she put me down and I ran to, my mom was like crouching down. I ran to her and I hugged her and she was like, "You scared me. Don't do that ever again," type of, that spiel. And then she was like, "Thank you for for returning my daughter, finding my daughter," or whatever. And when we looked up from hugging each other, the lady was gone. And it's in a mall. It's a straight shot. And it's like, where did this lady go? She didn't wait around for anything. She was just gone. And I always thought that stuck out in my mind a lot as a kid. I never really talked about it. And as I got older, I talked to my mom about it and she's like, "Oh, fully convinced that that was a guardian angel, 100%. And I was like, "Really? You too?" Because I always thought it was like magical. And she was like, "Oh yeah, 100%. You were protected. You were being protected." And I'm just like, whoa, okay. Like, when I heard my mom also say that, my mom believes in intuition, but she doesn't talk about it a lot. So that was kind of validating for me and nice to know that we are on the same wavelength about that. Um, so those are like my main, at least from what I can remember, stories about psychic things from my childhood. Now, as a professional psychic and energy reader, I have tons of other stories I can share. But I feel like it doesn't have as much of an element of magical realism because I understand more about these things. And so when I experience them, I feel more in control, which is very interesting. But kind of going in chronological order, this happened as I was learning how to become a psychic or learning how to tap into my psychic abilities. I was fresh out of knowing that I could become a psychic. I can't remember directly if I was in the middle of, I think I was in the middle of my mentorship with my the person that I learned from, or just finished it and was starting to like try and practice on my own to tap in to speak to my spirit guides and things like that, because I had a lot of fear around trusting myself when it came to that stuff. And this one's kind of funny, actually. I was in my apartment and my partner was there, Frankie. And I'm sitting down for meditation. He's doing something else. He was like reading or something like that on the couch. I was sitting down on my yoga mat and I'm like getting ready to open up and do some automatic writing or something and try and connect with my spirit guides. And I ask, is anybody here? And I saw, I guess for me, when I see things, it's like I don't actually see their physical form all the time, but I felt their presence of their energy was sitting on the couch next to my boyfriend, Frankie. And I was like freaked out because that was one of the first times that I had done that intentionally. And so I opened my eyes and because I that's how I'm like vision, I see like where the energy is in the room, right? And I asked Frankie, because Frankie is also intuitive, and him and his family have a history of being intuitive, and um he has told me, like, prior to that point in time, that he communicates with his grandparents who have passed on all the time and stuff like that. So I was like, he would know if there's somebody in the room because he's able to sense when his grandparents are in the room, right? In spirit. And so I freaked out. I opened my eyes and I was like, Frankie, can you like verify for me? Do you sense if there are other beings in this room? Because I sense that there's like 3 other beings in this room. And he looks around. He's like, no, there's none. So then I'm like, okay. So I close my eyes and I'm like, who are you? Like, what are you here for? Trying to figure out what's going on. And they're like, we're Frankie's grandparents. And I'm just like, are you serious? So I open my eyes. I'm like, Frankie, they said that they were your grandparents. He's like, oh, yeah. Yeah, my grandparents are here. They're right here on the couch next to me. And I was like, that's what I asked. I asked if there was beings. And he's like, well, I thought you meant like other beings. They're like always here. And I'm just like, come. It was just so funny. I'm like, that's the exact question I asked you. And now I'm freaking out. But here we are, right? No. So it was just really funny because I was like, because they were like, we're Frankie's grandparents. I don't know what he's talking about. And I just that was like one of the first times I'm like tapping into other stuff. So I was like, wow, of course this would happen to me. So then moving forward from that, earlier in my psychic medium days, I was hired to remove a shadow person from somebody's house, which was pretty sick. They came on my Instagram live when I was doing like free readings and stuff, like free mini readings. And they were asking questions about this presence that was in their house that they had tried to, banish or get rid of. And it kept coming back no matter what they did. And I tapped into it and I saw that it was a shadow person. And I was like, oh, this energy is like pretty intense. Like I thought it was just like, oh, it's going to be your grandma that's saying hi. And I was like, oh, I see what you're talking about. And they were like, yeah, it's intense. And I was like, yeah, this is a lot. You should try, like, if you don't want them to be there, maybe getting it removed or something. And so I was like, just DM me after, like, to get more information. And so they ended up booking the psychic reading with me. And it was pretty cool because coming from the true crime, occult, like Halloween horrors, that's what I was into a lot before learning that I was psychic. I mean, I still am, but that's my experience with that world, right? Until that time, I knew about shadow people from like indigenous lore and culture, and at least from what I've heard from people's like spooky spaghetti horror stories and things like that. And so I knew that most people were like, don't interact with a shadow person. And then as I started to get into my psychic stuff, there was this opposing belief that I heard around shadow people that was that it's either somebody in a different dimension or parallel dimension or that vibrates on a different like area or wavelength or energy than can be in the 3D world we know, is kind of like the veil is a little thin there and you kind of see them peek through. So sometimes I've heard it described as like you from another like dimension or universe, like looking at yourself, other beings like aliens and stuff, observing us, and then we become aware of them because they go to a little too deeply in, past their boundary. I've also heard it as like the shadow person is like you from your past or from some other time. So it can be a number of things. So, and I'm really good at protection and things like that and energy manipulation. So I didn't feel unsafe doing this. So I tapped in and I saw this shadow person in their home, and the fact that they kept coming back to their home no matter what this person had done, like crystals and things like that. And it was actually pretty cool because I started speaking to the shadow person to find out what they were there for and what their purpose was, like why weren't they leaving this family alone. And the more I talked to them, the more they kind of melted away the shadowy aspect, the scary, like dark shadow figure looking. And I became a woman who passed on. And she was saying that she felt she didn't want to cross over because she felt intense like guilt around how she was like as a mother in this life towards her children. And she didn't know any other way, but she wanted to communicate a message with her children. And this person that did the reading for was like psychic or energetically open. And so they were attracted to this person to try and get them to share this message, but they weren't really sure how to do that. And they weren't really getting anywhere. So they kind of like manifested into this scary form to get people to notice them, but also because it felt like they were just like consumed by their intense feelings and not knowing how to deal with them. And so as I spoke to this like ghost of this woman who passed on, I told her like, you can communicate more with your children if you pass over, because then you can learn how to send them signs and messages and things like that. And that is going to be a lot more fruitful for you than trying to get humans to relay messages to your children. So at least in that way, right? You can do it in a psychic reading for sure. But it was pretty cool because I was able to help her cross over. And it was like I had to like hold her hand as she walked on this like metaphorical like pathway to cross over like a threshold or a doorway. So like she had to choose to let go of this plane, I guess. And then after that, the people didn't have like any issues in their home. So it was pretty cool. That was like the first time I did something like that, and I was like, yo, this is pretty sick. I know not all shadow people are like the same. Like it's not all people who crossed over who are confused or stuck or something, but at least that person was. So I'm gonna take a break, and when I come back, we'll keep talking about more spooky spaghetti. That's like a thing. I don't know if you're into like Reddit or whatever, but it's like creepypasta is like a genre of like fake horror stories that people write, like fan fiction stuff. And this one podcast I listened to, they covered those types of stories. They would like search the internet and find good ones, and then they would call them spooky spaghetti. So that's why I'm saying that. And the podcast is called Last Podcast on the Left. It's like a play on a horror movie, Last House on the Left. So yes, when I come back, we'll continue. Hopefully you're having a good time listening, chatting, maybe having tea by the fireside. That would be sick. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm back. Okay, so I'm trying to look at my notes to make sure I'm going along with everything as it needs to be. Okay, yeah, cool. So probably a lot of you listen to Nike's podcast, Pretty Intuitive. We worked together long ago, and Nike helped me with some ancestral healing. Huge shout out to Nike. She is like amazing at what she does. And it was really sick because with the ancestral healing, a giant came through, and like Nike is really empowering and like sharing other beings' energies and being like, no, this is real. And I was like, wait a minute. So one of my ancestors has giant energy or is a giant. That's really fucking sick. And it was kind of hard to communicate with this being. So I I can't remember if it was her that suggested it or if the giant suggested it to go to inner earth where they live. So if you're not aware, like the theory, I guess, depending upon what theory you believe in, is that well, the one that I believe in is there were all these other beings that walked on the earth, and then as humans started to take over, they were like, yo, the vibration or the energy is different here, and they went to inner earth. That's what I've learned. um which is like a space inside of earth that only they're allowed to go into, that they live in, and that's how they're able to like some people believe that they have like portals where they pop in and out, and that's how you get like sightings of Bigfoot and things like that, but we don't know where they live or ever see them. And then some people believe that they only come telepathically now because it's not really safe for them to fully come onto the earth without being like the phenomena of Bigfoot, where like people are like stalking and taking photos and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just mostly sharing like my experience of what it was to go to inner earth, which was pretty cool. It's definitely very energetically draining to do it. I spoke to the giant and asked if I could do it, and then they showed me how to get there. And it was like stepping through this portal. But if you've ever done energetic work, like channeling or things like that, you have to sustain a lot of energy to let a being like exist within you for a period of time, and have access to your energy. So I went into inner earth, and it was really cool because it was just like the whole time I had like this pressure in my ears that I've mentioned in my episode with working with aliens, that when I sustain a lot of energy or work with energetic beings who are like higher energies, I my body my the way my intuition works is I get like this pressure in my ears, like as if you were like on an airplane or something, but it's like for the whole time, and I can like hear the pressure. It's not just like it's there, but it's like vibrating in my ears, almost as if there's like adrenaline in just my ears. um and I can feel the energy like moving through my body, and more energy, I guess. And it was really cool to go there because when they explained to me, the giant explained to me, like when they have to come here to earth to speak to me or to people, it takes a lot of their energy, so that's why they weren't really using a lot of words to communicate. So for me to go to inner earth, they were preserving a lot of their energy, and they could share answers better, and they spoke more fluently, um or just like with more words. um and I was just asking questions, and I feel like I could just communicate those questions to them, like they could just hear whatever questions Nike was asking or I was asking, and I could hear their answers. And the energy there was very like, it's hard to describe sometimes, but it did feel like very untouched. Like as if you discover something that people don't know about, like when you go on a vacation and you find like the secret cool like waterfall thing on a hike or something like that. It felt kind of like that. And I feel like there was a sense of like this being had to invite me here for the other beings to be okay with it. And each being had like I saw other beings there, and like each of them has their own way of how they communicate and things like that. But because it was like part of my ancestry, or because I already had contact with this person, it was like okay, because I had to make it clear when I went, like they made me like agree to terms, kind of, that I was just there kind of like just to observe. I wasn't like interacting with anything. I was just there to listen and to make it easier for communication, almost as if I was there but inside of a bubble. Because I feel like they're like very protective of that space and protecting like their peace and stuff like that, and their energy. So that was pretty cool. That kind of helped me to learn how to create portals to move into different energies and dimensions, which is something I talk about in my masterclass that's available on my website. Shameless self plug. And something that I'm actually really good at is, like I said, energy manipulation. So portals comes with that, like moving between dimensions. And speaking of that, this will segue into our next story. That has been something that has been coming up more, is to embrace that energy. I don't know, that I have that specific flavor of magic, right? Everybody has their own magic. And I have been trying to tap into that more intentionally, because I feel like as a kid, I definitely, like I said, my dreams were super vivid. I was able to tap into more of that stuff as a kid imaginatively. And so now I kind of have these periods where when I'm walking outside and I'll let myself, it feels like I'm going energetically into a liminal space where I'm existing physically on one plane and psychically on another. And so a couple months ago, I was walking my dog um in my neighborhood. I don't know why I forgot the word neighborhood. And I let myself slip into that space. And I feel like you have to be, let me preface this in saying, like, your energy has to be in a good spot for this. Like, you have to prep your body, like, be really grounded. And I just saw, I was walking with my eyes closed so I could see better what was there energetically. And I saw like completely different universe, but that I was able to tap into and exist in at the same time as this one. That for me specifically, my guides have shared that this is something I need to do more, because that's where um I find more inspiration and information, and that's where I'll be able to find more answers for myself, because I have like I think it's like my Jupiter placement in my 12th house, which means it's hard for me to see my gifts and my luck and stuff like that, I've heard from astrologers. I'm obviously like botching whatever amazing wording they used. Um, and a way for me to tap into that is to be in the spirit or be in the psychic realms so that I can tap into that more. So I've been doing that, and yeah, it was just like, it's going to sound like cheesy, but it was definitely like rainbows, lollipops. Like, I was seeing way more colors on the ground, and like every time I took a step, I could see my energy like emanating off of my feet where I was standing on the ground, kind of like an after image. And there's like different music playing, and there's different animals, and like it just felt so connected and magical to everything. And I will say, I wasn't on any drugs or anything. I don't really do any of that kind of stuff um that much. And yeah, it was, I'm excited to explore that more, because I feel like part of me when I was a kid was really open to that, and then I kind of shut off and was like, you need to exist in the logical world based off of, my programming and stuff from my parents. And I know that I do tap into that stuff unknowingly. And so I'm trying to embrace that more and bring that more. And that's sort of what if you follow my regular account, what I've been talking about, creating more offerings for about the energy work that I do and how I can do that for people, is to bring people to different dimensions and different spaces energetically. But yeah, um, it was just, it made my energy feel so good being in that space. It felt like I belonged there. Like I was connected to everything at once. Like all the magic in the world was present and safe in that whatever dimension I was in. Um, and then, so I'll talk about when I started doing energy work, I became Reiki certified, and then I was doing distance Reiki for people. So they don't need to be like present in front of you physically. Energy, it doesn't really follow the bounds of time and space. So you can you can send Reiki energy to a past thing, which is what I do with my inner child healing and stuff. We're changing the energy of the past, in more than just Reiki, but in other ways. But I was doing that where people would, pay for a session. They would just need to lie down for 45 minutes in their home, and then I would do the Reiki session from my home, connecting to their energy, and then I would give them a rundown kind of what came up. And it was really cool because when I became Reiki certified and I started doing this, I had a really, really intense visuals come through for people where I was tapping into like their generational cycles. I was tapping into the current energy they were feeling in their body, whether it was like physically feeling ill or energetically, like things that like they were holding on to, or traumas or things like that, which is one of my gifts. And it was the first time I saw that crazy visual while I was doing Reiki, because I didn't really experience that when I was learning Reiki, because I was starting to let myself, try new things and go and find my own way, because I don't do just traditional Reiki now. And this was a part of that. And it was cool because I was working with the trees in my neighborhood at the time. And they had told me, if you want to grow and expand into more stuff, call us in during your Reiki session and we will help you. And I was like, really? You could do that? And they're like, yeah, of course. Um, and so then I had started working with aliens around that time. And I was like, could y'all do this too? And they're like, yeah, we'll show you things. So during this Reiki session, I like unlocked light language, which is freaking wild. Like I was doing it for this client and I saw this generational cycle that was buried. It was this cool visual of like this mountain that had a waterfall, like a cliff with a waterfall, and that this generational cycle was like buried in the dirt, in the soil, and I was helping them to tend to it, to have it grow into something new. um and I'm trying to remember as best as I can, right? And because everything comes through, like if you're psychic or if you see visuals and stuff, like you're intuitive and you see visuals, they come through like full visions, but in a second. And then you're like, wait, I need to process all of this. But it's just like, boop. And then you're like, wait, that was a whole freaking like 5 minute vision that I just saw in 1 second. So that's how it comes through for me sometimes. So I have to like try and process. But when you're actively doing energy work, it's like now the next thing, now the next thing, now the next thing. I can like process things like really quickly. So I did that, and then I was, visualizing myself holding the seeds to infuse new stuff into them, and then I just started speaking light language. And for some people, light language is they don't know what they're saying. Some people know what the words mean. Some people know feelings and things like that. And for me, I don't really know exactly what the words mean, but if I ask, I can kind of hear like I say the word and then I can hear like what it roughly translates into in terms of like the statement or thing, like what the sentiment, what they're saying is. So I kind of, because I just asked that I want to know what I'm saying. Um, and yeah, so I experienced that and I was like, whoa, what the F? Like, and they were kind of telling me like your clients energy or soul like needs to hear it in this format. That's kind of what I heard was like it needs to be said this way to them. And then I started saying light language. And I will say as a disclaimer, I haven't really shared a lot of light language because I've seen different people posting about using light language and having no issue, and some people saying it's like racist or whatever because it's sounds like certain it sounds like indigenous language or things like that. So I'm still educating myself on it. But I've seen tons of people of color and other people using it. So I'm kind of like, I think if it feels right for me, I'm gonna do it, but also still trying to look up more education on that. And I do know that everybody's light language is slightly different. And when I tap in, mine kind of sounds like Hebrewish, which is kind of cool. Um, because I'm Jewish. So it's like, at least I'm basing it off of things that make sense to me and my culture. I don't know. This is a whole side tangent, anyways. But yeah, so I spoke to them and I told them afterwards that I was just prompted in the middle of their session to start speaking to them. And I didn't really know what I was saying at the time, but I was just speaking it. And it was really cool. And I think that the trees or whatever, they helped me with that. They helped me to see to unlock these like new skills that I had that I was kind of like on the cusp of, because with regular Reiki, you're just supposed to envision the person's energy in between your hands and like send them source energy, healing energy, and the energy you can send it to a specific spot, but it's going to go where it needs to go. But for me, because I call it like psychic energy work that I do, it's more about I'm seeing visuals, I'm tapping into things, I'm understanding more things than just sending the energy. Like I can sense, oh, you're having stomach issues, like this energy is like really tight in this like energy center of your body from a past trauma or wound that you're holding on to, or this thing in your body that I'm seeing energetically is associated with a generational wound, so I'm helped to remove that or to shift that. So it's pretty cool. And I started seeing all that stuff, and now that's why I have kind of like my own mix of what I've been guided to do by working with different beings. And Yeah, so and then I got to do in-person Reiki with a client, and I spoke the light language and they heard it, and afterwards it was really cool because they told me, um, in terms of the light language, they didn't know what I was saying, but they kind of envisioned me as this, like, large they envisioned this large figure, like, mother-like figure speaking to them, and to, like, their soul, I guess, and they understood, like they didn't know what the words were, but they understood what was being said, like, their soul understood what was being said, and they heard certain they, I guess, perceived or comprehended certain things based off of what the light language was saying, so that was pretty cool because I had never, at that point in time, I had never done it in front of people, and I was kinda shy about it, and then I did it with, like, a one-on-one client in person, and it was cool to hear how they received it and their experience of how they what they heard, and it was very similar to like what was actually being said in terms of the point of saying it, but it wasn't exactly the same. So it's very interesting, like what I was hearing, this is what I'm generally saying by speaking the light language, and what the client felt was what it's to me it proves like everybody we experience energy differently and intuition differently. So it was cool to hear what the client actually sensed or heard or felt from the light language was actually different from what I was saying, but made more sense to them, which I feel like a lot of psychic stuff, like we relay certain messages and things, and then it means something to our sitter, right? To our client. Um, Speaking of psychic readings, I have this really cool one that like blows my mind. So I did in-person mini readings at this local store here in Burbank called the Mystic Museum. And this lady came to get a reading for me, and she was talking to me about she found out her, like, I think it was her great 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 grandma, if not farther back, was a like the town gypsy, and they're from like a, I don't know if it was like Romania or a place where gypsies were known, and people came to her for healing, and she had known that for a while, and she never got to meet the grandma or whatever, but she had heard stories about her, and then over time that through her family they stopped, assimilation or fear or whatever, persecution. Gypsies were murdered in World War II as well. And they wanted to connect to that lineage, and they felt hesitant to because they weren't sure if they were allowed to. And so they asked me to bring forward this relative who was the gypsy in the town. And she it was pretty cool because basically I like channeled her for a second, because the reason why I understand this to be is she was a gypsy, so she knew about magic and how to work with magic. She's not just a regular person who passed over. So she understood more of the energetics of things and how to work with my energy. And that's why I feel like she only channeled it for like a second, or not a second, but to say what she needed to say and then left. And she didn't jump into my whole body. So it's pretty cool. So this person was asking me like, um, is it okay? Is it allowed for me to learn these things or to practice these things? And then what happened was I was kind of speaking in a different tone too, and I just said it's in your blood, and I like tapped on I think my arm or something, showing like the blood in your arm, and then I was like, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to kind of like yell at you about that. And then she was like, no, I've heard this over and over. It's in your blood, like it's allowed, like it is you regardless or not. And she was like starting to cry, and she was saying like, I've heard this but I doubted it, and I was like, your relative, like, and it was cool for me how I experienced it was like the relative that passed on this gypsy woman, she jumped into my throat. It felt like she jumped into just my throat, not my entire body, said what she needed to say, and then left my throat because it wasn't in my tone. It wasn't like I wasn't angry, but it was like came out really loud and quickly. Like, it's in your blood. I like almost yelled it at her. And And I said, like, "I'm sorry, like, I think your, like, great, great, great grandma, like, jumped into my throat right now and spoke to tell you this." Like, I could feel how fiercely she wanted to just be like, "Stop worrying about this. It belongs to you. It's in your genetics for a reason." And it was wild because she was, like, crying. Like, it was very validating for her because all this experience, but it was cool. It's, like, the only time that I've, like, channeled like a human person, and I'm a little bit scared to like fully channel some other beings, so it was cool to experience that. And it was just wild to me. The more I thought about it, I started realizing like it was just in my throat. Like it was so cool. I don't know if if you've experienced that, but I definitely recognize that like she knew how to do that kind of energetics, and that's how she was able to just like boom, come in and come right back out. Like this is what needs to be said, and that's gonna be enough to like convince my relative, you know, my progeny sitting in front of you that it's okay for her to embrace her culture and her like lineage. But yeah, it was I didn't have like a lot of stuff like that happen when I was doing the in-person readings at the Mystic Museum. A lot of the people just get general readings or it's like their first time getting a reading. So it's pretty cool when I connect with people like that and they have like cool they already understand more about this world, like the spiritual world. Um and then it looks like I just have um one more story left. So the last story, I think I talked about it a tiny bit on the episode with Ren about working with a demon. So this one I can go into more in depth with because I know I didn't for sure share everything on that story. Um so I was it was like hired but not hired. It was somebody I knew and they asked me to work like a hex spell or like a justice retribution spell for them on their behalf. And I was like, I'm not going to charge you money because this person that they wanted me to direct this spell towards was garbage. um, and like, I don't use that term lightly about people. This person was complete garbage. And they're in the spiritual world. They're very well known in certain circles. They have a lot of power and say, and they abuse people and their bodies. And so my friend had found out and they were like, could you do some magic for me, please, around this? Because they didn't really know how to do magic. And I set up this whole spell. And it was my first time doing something that was not that I was afraid of doing like a hex or something, but I knew how much spiritual energy surrounded the person that I was directing the spell towards. And I knew that it would need to be more than just like a simple spell. And so I set up this whole tray in my like my bathroom is kind of like at that time it was like I think it's like European style where it's like the hallway has like the sink and then the bathroom, like the actual toilet and bath is in a separate room. So it's like kind of like a narrow hallway. And I put it there and because I had mirrors in that hallway and I knew that the mirrors could be portals. And I put salt around it and everything. And I lit a candle and I did all that stuff. And I stood next to it a little bit out of the hallway because I needed more space to move around while I was moving the energy around. And I was saying what I needed to say. And it was the first time I saw like a shadow person thing at like with my physical eye open out of the corner of my eye, super close to me. Like they were standing right next to me. And I freaked out for a second. And then my intuition was like, you can trust this being. It's not here for bad reasons, but it is like a demon or something like that. Like that's why you were like kind of scared by them, but they're here to help you because they see like the work that you're doing right now and they want to support you in this. And I was like still a little bit scared, but I was like, okay, you can stay, I guess. And they kind of told me like to ground myself in the underworld. So they were like, stand in front of your like tray in the hall and like bring the spell. They were telling me to like bring the spell into the underworld to root it there so that they can like do more work around that. And so I stood in front of it and I had this visual appear in my mind that I was being energetically transported into the underworld in this like elevator. Like I was not, I guess, like I had business, so I got to come through the business entrance. I don't know how to describe it, but I went in this really long elevator. It didn't look like an actual elevator, but it moved like an elevator. Like I was just slowly moving downwards in this vessel. And then when I got there, I got to walk around a little bit, and I was just standing down there, and it felt very comforting and very grounding to me because I'd never grounded in the underworld before, but it felt very homey and like familiar to me. And I continued doing the spell like in that space, and then when I was done, I like left it there, kind of like tied it to that space in the underworld. And it was just really cool because like I wish I wasn't as scared by all these things when they first happened, but I think it's just your natural human reaction. You know, you need to have more, at least for me, I need to have more interactions, but I feel like I could have done more to work with the demon, but I was definitely scared. But it was cool how my intuition was like, no, this being is here to work with you. They're not bad. Even though they look kind of like scary to you. And yeah, like talking about all this stuff now gets me like really excited to work with them again and to do more stuff like this. So maybe I can share more stories with you. I haven't shared everything, but these are like the ones that came to mind when I was sitting down to write notes. And yeah, it was just really wild. Like all the stories were really wild, but love to hear how y'all are feeling about this. You know, DM me, share on the if you listen on Anchor, you can put comments on the posts that I make on our Instagram page at Witchy and Weird Pod. And if you want to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, that is like really, really helpful. It takes like 2 minutes. I would really, truly appreciate it if more people did that. Or just like reviewing, like posting on tagging on your social media, saying like, everybody listen to this, post like one of our reels. Tagging us is really amazing. You know, word of mouth, recommend it to your friends. And of course, the Patreon, you've probably heard, it's in the beginning of the episode, the new setting for the Patreon and how it's going to be set up. I will start sending the first quarter will be kind of the first quarter that I'll send mail for patrons who are in the 2nd to 4th tiers. They'll get their special box, their like merch, like personalized box. That's gonna, I think in June is when I'll first send it out. I think that's what because April, May, June. Yeah. So, because I'm a little behind at this point. But you have until June if you want to get your first box. And of course, all of it, regardless, supports us, supports me, the mission, the guests, bringing them on, the time that I put into all of this. And I'm just really eternally grateful for all of you. And when I say eternally grateful, I mean like the aliens in Toy Story, because that's what I always imagine is like that scene, like we're eternally grateful. That's like my little inner child's heart that's so grateful for everybody here and what this podcast is going to blossom into. So until next time, everyone, bye! If you love Witchy and Weird podcasts, support us by donating monthly for as little as 99 cents at anchor.fm/witchyandweird/support. You can cancel at any time and 100% of the proceeds go directly to the pod. Or, if you don't want to commit to a monthly donation, buy Amanda a coffee at ko-fi.com/wishyandweird to help fuel them while they record, edit, create, and upload content for the podcast. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and tell your witchy and weird friends about us too. Bye!